Bright lights is going to be a pretty bright future for Flesh and Blood and Legend Story Studios. So I'm Glue, and I'm going to talk for like 10-15 minutes. I'm going to sound a little crazy, but bear with me. And why don't we just jump in, right? I'll come straight out with it. What if Flesh and Blood was no longer a TCG, right? Especially not a classic TCG. What if it was a board game? What if the board game model of delivery and marketability was used for Flesh and Blood, right? While that sinks in, while you connect a few dots, why don't we go the opposite way, okay? So when we look at other card games, right, one of the main functions or systems that the corporate body includes in order to make sure it sells at every release is to have a standard or rotational system, right? So what this leads to is the desire for people to participate in the yearly releases, in the release cycle, to make sure that they are current, right? If you're playing MTG, if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh, right, the majority of people play the latest formats, or the majority of people coming into the game play the latest formats, meaning that you want the latest products, right? So that fuels the demand for the latest products. But Flesh and Blood doesn't do that, right? Flesh and Blood is a non-rotating card pool where every set has some level of presence to the current meta, right? Again, bearing in mind the Living Legend status that can remove heroes from play, all cards are still valid and legal. Even, for instance, say, if all Elemental Guardian are gone, which they are from one of the formats, right? So no Elemental Guardian cards are currently used in play, but they are still all legal to play, right? So the big concept is you can essentially buy any set you want, right? If you want, in this case of Bright Lights, Mechanologist, well, you're most likely going to buy Arcane Rising cards, Crew, and Bright Lights. Every other set doesn't really matter to you. There might be a few staples here and there, you know, in the generic slot that you might want, but generally speaking, those are the sets you're going to go after. Now, what we're getting to is more and more specialized products that really focus in on certain segments of the community in terms of them participating in their release cycle and opening and playing with the cards. So for instance, Bright Lights is very divisive, right? Not everyone jives with mechs, right? So not everyone is going to participate in the release cycle. And I would almost like to say, almost, right? Because again, the community is so strong and so in love with Flesh and Blood. Even I, right? I really don't like science fiction in my fantasy. I'm still gonna, buy 5 cases, maybe something like that, maybe half of what I normally buy to open and enjoy. Right, because again, I want to support Legend Story Studios and I like the game of Flesh and Blood. But in saying that, right, it is now a highly specialized product, okay? So it's not meant for everyone, and they know that. They don't want it to be for everyone. They don't want to pressure everyone into participating in every product, right? And they want you to know that your cards will still be valid and you don't have to be current. In fact, you don't have to follow the sets. More in line, you have to follow whatever heroes or classes you like to play and want to enjoy. And the other big thing about most TCG companies is they are in opposition of their secondary market, right? They don't want their secondary market. The secondary market to them is a loss of sales because people buying off the secondary market means that they are not buying their products. For Legend Story Studios, that is quite the opposite, right? Their whole tagline is, we want single card resellers who invest in Fab to prosper from their investment and the service they provide to the Fab community. They want a strong backbone of them providing the product and then the community fulfilling the needs of the singles market through the secondary card market, right? They don't want to oppose them. They don't want to do things that upset them, and they don't want to do things that detract from what they're doing. They want their community to stand strong and together, which is fantastic, right? And again, is something that normal TCG companies don't do, right? They're not making products to then have the secondary card market prosper. To have people, buy mass boxes to open and sell singles. They want their product to fulfill all the needs. So for instance, in MTG, that is where we have this absurd branching mentality, right? Where they have products for the collectors, they have products for the players, they have products for people who want to, get a jumpstart and do it worse than Fab, in all honesty, right? Because Crack Shuffle Play is sizing up to be significantly better than jumpstart, right? Same sort of concept, just executed significantly better by Legend Story Studios, in my opinion, right? But in saying all that, right, what do we get to? Well, we get to the different mentality, where it's not a TCG, rather, in terms of marketing, it shouldn't be a TCG. It should be marketed as a board game, right? a board game. They're selling everything you need to play, and then everyone else is fulfilling the needs of the secondary market and the cards that are needed for the competitive scene, which is fantastic. Again, they're trying to make sure that not in direct opposition. If they see something sort of going out of whack, in the case of, say, the Fairy Dust Spring Tuning, they will step in and guide it into the direction that they are more comfortable with, right? They don't want cards to be a insta-win, you sell singles, make big money. No, they want it to be a stable meal ticket, right? And actually enable people to do that as their fulfillment. They want the community to drive the singles market, the distribution of singles, and the way that the needs of the competitive scene are fulfilled, right? And then they want to step in and they want to supply the product for the people who will enjoy it most, which is what they're heading towards with specialized products like Bright Lights, right? They don't have to worry about making sure everyone participates in release. Rather, they can set it up, stick it on a shelf, and have people who come along, want to just get into it and play, want to try something new, just experience it, right? Think of Catan, Ticket to Ride, in Monopoly, right? The way they work. They sell the board game sits on a shelf, and every now and then, if you want to try it, you try it, right? If you want an expansion, you buy an expansion. You want a different variation, you buy a different variation. And that is the great philosophy that I think Legend Story Studios should really dive into going forward, and they might already be planning that, right? From the looks of Bright Lights, they certainly are. Another wonderful thing it also means is that Legend Story Studios have a great amount of faith in their community, right? Again, in relation to this tagline and fulfilling the needs of the second-hand market, and make sure that everyone has, available singles for whatever their playing needs are. Now, in the case of Bright Lights, why does this function so well? Well, primarily because of the crack shuffle play mechanic, but also because it is highly specialized. Again, their mentality is sort of shifting from trying to get everyone to participate in every release to buying products that you are going to enjoy most and maximizing the people who will enjoy the product, maximizing the amount of enjoyment they can get out of the product, right? So in case of crack shuffle play, right? So 3 packs allow you to just make a deck and go at it, right? So 3 packs, 24 in a box, means you can get 8 crack shuffle plays or 4 matches for 2 people, right? So at $80, right, you're buying a board game. Again, we'll start using the term board game. For $80, which is somewhat similar to Catan, Ticket to Ride. I don't know in the US, but board games here are quite expensive, right? So you're paying that money, you're getting your 4 matches out of it, right? You can still then play the other formats. You can reuse the cards. You can do all these other things with it and still play and get your enjoyment. But $40 for, a weekend of play, split between 2, split between 3 or 4, however you want to do it, seems fair, okay? But then, this is the big kicker. You now have a board game where sometimes your pieces actually recoup your money, right? Sometimes when you open your board game, the pieces you have, other people are gonna want, and you can then get some of your money back. That is just a mind-blowing concept to me, right? Imagine in Monopoly, everyone loves the car. So imagine if some ludicrous mentality was out there where everyone just wanted to buy the cars, okay? So every Monopoly set, you could just have max cars and everyone could be the car, right? And then obviously the thimble would be worthless, right? That's your common, and the car is your fable, right? But conceptually, it sounds pretty neat, right? To then suck people in, say, you want to give it a go? Crack shuffle play. Sometimes your pieces are now worth something. You buy a board game and you retain a little bit of your money. Sometimes you even go positive, right? Isn't that fantastic? A discount inbuilt into the board game. And again, in terms of crack shuffle play and also the specialization of the set, right? They're really maximizing the fun, because they can make sure that the mechanics work well together, that it is significantly easier to probably playtest, right? And then also develop conceptually. So for instance, in Bright Lights, we now know that there are a lot of cards that are in opposition of mechs. So there are cards that are specifically built for the draft experience or the limited experience, right? Which is great. Again, the common slot often goes to waste. They are usually just pack fillers. Here, they serve a better purpose. For instance, in Dusk Till Dawn, if a lot of the cards were actually useful, right? If you could play limited formats with them, they'd probably be felt a bit better. But in the case of Bright Lights, that's exactly what we have. Again, it's specialized for mech, so you can now enjoy it. And anyone who is going to enjoy mechs is going to enjoy this that much more because of how focused on mechs it is. They can really go that extra mile if their ideas are now grounded and centered around one core concept. So I think going forward, right, the mentality will be every product can be specialized. We will leave the secondary market to those running the secondary market, right? If there is a card going a bit too expensive, we'll do our best to help it along so that the community benefits from it, but we don't upset or destroy the secondary market in the case of something like, say, MTG and what they're doing currently. And then in terms of our product design, we will create something that can maximize fun for the people who will enjoy it most, right? Rather than getting a box and there being, you know, generally speaking, a fourth of the cards of interest to you and everything else just being something that, you know, is there and usable, but not necessarily what you've come directly for, right? So again, I like to throw out the idea that the majority of people probably play 2 to 3 heroes, okay? There will be people who obviously play more. I cannot fathom anyone playing every single hero. Even in Classic Constructed, where you have less heroes than Blitz, I cannot fathom someone, you know, maintaining decks for every single hero. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 of you out there, but again, on average, I would say the majority of people play 2 to 3. Okay, so you can now find the set you want. The big question that then comes into question is print runs. How's that going to work? Because again, the board game mentality is you set up production, you stick it on a shelf, and you leave it. And you just slowly collect your dividends as people come by it, play, experience, try, and, you know, move on to the expansions. So I'm curious, print-wise, right? Is it still going to be limited? I mean, since Monarch, Tales, and Everfest, right? I think Legend Story Studios have come to realize that it will sit on a shelf, right? It's not going to have this mass demand straight away like some other games like Pokemon, like MTG, in terms of, you know, some of the collectors if they do crazy stupid stuff, right? So again, they're just hopping into their own lane, doing their own thing and being happy and just making it the best they can possibly make it. And that's fantastic to see, right? Again, conceptually, I love the idea of bright lights. I've talked about in the past as specialized products and what I would like to see. And, you know, this isn't far off. And I have to concede that the way they're starting to handle it is better. Does it need some tweaking? Yes. Does it need some refinement? Sure. But it is still a great start. And, you know, in a year's time, right? If they ramp up production a little, they cut down the card sizes rather than be 250, be 200 card set, 150 card set, ramp up the expansion slot a little bit to still have that little bit of interest from outside of the core mechanologist population. But in a year's time, right, you go into a game store and you have Bright Lights, Savage Lands, Aria set, Monarch set, all set up, and a new player comes along and you can just see them go, we'll give this a go. Looks super easy to play because of the crack shuffle play mechanic that's nice and bold on a box. Make sure it is, right? But what expansion do I play? Well, I like mechs, we'll try mechs. I don't like mechs, all right, we'll try Savage Lands, right? We tried mechs last week, right? Let's try Aria this week, and so forth and so on. And again, really narrowing it down and understanding what you want to be as a product is the majority of the battle. Understanding that you can live symbiotically with the people selling your product in terms of the secondary market is also of benefit, because you're not constantly fighting a war on 2 fronts where you have to make sure that your cards are a better, you know, cost advantaged for people to open than just going to the secondary market, right? So in all honesty, it seems like Bright Lights marks the start of a new era where products are designed to maximize fun, to maximize play, and we are just leaving the secondary market completely to the secondary market runners, people who open boxes en masse and can supply the necessary cards, right, at a reasonable price, right? Reasonable. We'll see how things go. Again, the expansion slot is a bit up for grabs at the moment, given again how hard it is going to be to pull actual full playsets. But yeah, just in terms of concept, I think it's time to move away from TCG, or well, I should say classic more so, right? It's always going to be TCG. It's always going to be a tradable card game, right? But classic. You don't want to be like Magic. You don't want to be like Pokemon. You don't want to be like Yu-Gi-Oh! And even to me, what does classic mean outside of just this philosophy, right? I think focus your products. You don't need mass product lines if you're doing this. You just have to ramp up the release cycle to make sure that there is going to be something for different people all the times. And make sure you go from thematic sets as well. That's another concept to really hammer in. So for instance, those in love with sci-fi, well, the opposition to that is probably people who love brutes, right? That's probably the polar opposite of the tech savvy is the savagery, right? And then you could have wizards into warriors, right? And make sure that the themes are, again, on the opposite end of the spectrum, so that you are going from one side of the community to the other side and back and forth and collecting as many people as you can, making sure that interest is on the right. I mean, if we went from, say, mech to wizard to illusionist to, something like that, right? Then the overlap is definitely going to change. Because in terms of not only playstyle, but and thematics, right? You can definitely group different heroes together. And you can definitely group different places together, right? So as long as they manage this correctly, think about releases and maximize the fun, understand that their secondary market isn't their opponent, their opposition, right? They have a real winning product here, right? Again, you don't need the product lines. Your whole concept is to make this maximize fun, stick it on a shelf, and let the people come, right? Treat it like a board game in terms of marketability,